If my taxi driver had simply smiled, taken the fare, and driven away that night, I would have walked through my front door and straight into the worst mistake of my life. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 64 years old, and this happened to me in Chicago. 3 years ago, my husband Richard died quietly in his sleep beside me. 41 years of marriage ended in one silent morning. No warning, no final goodbye, just stillness. The kind of stillness that changes the sound of an entire house forever. Richard had been a city bus mechanic for most of his life. His hands always smelled faintly of motor oil, no matter how hard he scrubbed them. I worked as a medical billing clerk at a rehabilitation center on the north side of the city. We were never wealthy, but we were stable, careful, responsible. We raised one son together, Caleb. For most of his life, Caleb had been the center of everything we built. Richard used to say, "One day all of this will belong to him." Back then, those words sounded comforting. Now they haunt me. After Richard died, the hospital bills consumed nearly everything we had saved. The insurance covered some expenses, but not enough. By the time the funeral was over, I understood something terrifying. Grief is expensive. At 64, I could not afford retirement, so I kept working, 3 days a week at the rehabilitation center. Mostly paperwork, insurance disputes, patient billing corrections. Quiet work for a quiet woman. I lived alone in the same narrow brick townhouse Richard and I bought in the early 1980s. The neighborhood had changed over the years. The bakery on the corner became a liquor store. Families moved out. Bars moved in. At night, the streets felt unfamiliar, especially after dark. Caleb lived nearly 40 minutes away in Naperville with his wife Lanessa and their 2 daughters. He worked in corporate finance downtown, always busy, always traveling, always exhausted. At least that was what he told me. After Richard passed away, Caleb called less often, visited less often. Sometimes weeks passed between conversations. I told myself it was normal. Children grow older, they build lives. Parents become memories living quietly in the background. Still, some nights the loneliness inside that house felt physical, like another person sitting beside me in silence. My shifts ended at 10:30 p.m., too late for me to feel comfortable taking the train home alone anymore, especially after the mugging that happened 2 blocks from the rehabilitation center last winter. So Caleb insisted I start using taxis and ride apps. "You can't be walking around at night alone anymore, Mom." I resisted at first. Richard and I had always been careful with money. Paying for rides felt wasteful. But eventually I gave in. That is how I met Hassan. The first night he picked me up, snow drifted lightly across the windshield while downtown traffic crawled beneath glowing streetlights. He looked to be in his late 50s, calm eyes, gray at the temples, soft spoken. His cab smelled faintly of coffee and cedar. "You Eleanor?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded politely and started driving. No forced conversation, no loud radio, no unnecessary questions. Just quiet. And strangely, that quiet comforted me. Over the next several months, Hassan became my regular driver. Not officially, but somehow he was always nearby when I requested a ride home after work. He learned my routine. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday nights. Same pickup spot, same destination, same tired woman carrying the same brown leather purse. At first, our conversations stayed simple: weather, traffic, Chicago winters. But little by little, the silence between us became familiar instead of awkward. One night, he noticed my hands trembling while I searched for cash in my purse. "Long shift?" he asked gently. "Insurance audits," I sighed. People get very angry when money is involved. He gave a small, understanding nod. "Yes," he said quietly. They do. After that, I started bringing in extra coffee from the rehabilitation center vending machine for him. Nothing fancy, just plain coffee with one cream. The first time I handed it forward between the seats, he looked surprised. You don't have to do that. I know, I said, but nights are long. Something softened in his expression after that. By February, those rides home had become the only consistent conversation in my life. Hassan remembered things: which nights my knees hurt, which nights I looked tired, which nights my porch light flickered. Sometimes he waited until I unlocked my front door before driving away. I assumed it was politeness. I did not realize then that he had already started noticing things I had missed, like the dark SUV parked too often near my block, or the man who sometimes stood beside the newspaper box pretending to smoke while watching my house, or how frequently my son's expensive black sedan appeared outside my home when he supposedly had meetings across the city. At the time, I ignored all of it, because loneliness makes you grateful for even small attention, and because mothers want to believe the best about their children, even when something inside them whispers otherwise. That whisper started growing louder 3 weeks before everything changed. It began with small things: a kitchen drawer slightly open when I knew I had closed it, a hallway light left on upstairs, documents shifted inside my office cabinet. At first, I blamed myself. Age makes you question your own memory. You begin apologizing for things that are not your fault. Then one Saturday afternoon, Caleb stopped by unexpectedly. He looked distracted, restless, checking his phone constantly. Vanessa stayed in the car. She's not feeling well, he explained quickly. I invited him inside anyway. For almost an hour, he walked through the house while pretending not to. His eyes lingered on Richard's old office, the filing cabinet, the hallway closet, the basement door. At one point, he casually asked, "You still keep Dad's paperwork downstairs?" Something tightened quietly inside my chest. "Yes," I answered slowly. "Why?" "No reason," he said too quickly. "Just wondering." Before leaving, he hugged me distractedly. Then he said something strange. "You should really think about downsizing, Mom." I laughed softly. This house is all I have left. He avoided my eyes after that. 3 nights later, Hassan drove me home through freezing rain. Traffic was terrible. Downtown lights smeared across the wet glass like watercolor paint. Halfway home, my phone rang. Caleb. I answered immediately. "Hi, sweetheart." His voice sounded rushed. "Hey, Mom. Just wanted to let you know I'm working late tonight." Something about the sentence felt rehearsed, like he wanted it remembered. "Okay," I said carefully. "You going straight home after work?" "Yes." A pause. Then, "Good. Lock your doors tonight. Crime's getting bad." The line disconnected. I stared at my phone. Hassan glanced at me briefly through the rearview mirror. "Everything okay?" "My son," I said. "He's working late." Hassan's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Then he looked back toward the road, and for the first time since I met him, his voice carried something that sounded like concern. "What does your son drive again?" I frowned slightly. "A black BMW." Silence filled the cab. Then slowly, very slowly, Hassan missed the turn onto my street and quietly whispered, "Don't go inside yet." The moment Hassan said those words, my entire body went cold. Don't go inside yet. Rain tapped softly against the windshield while traffic lights reflected red across the dashboard. I stared at the back of his head, trying to understand what I had just heard. "What?" His eyes stayed fixed on the road. "You heard me." My throat tightened. "Hassan, what's going on?" Instead of answering, he drove 2 blocks past my street and pulled into the empty parking lot of a closed laundromat. The neon open sign flickered weakly, even though the building was dark inside. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The heater hummed quietly. Rain slid down the windows. Finally, Hassan turned slightly in his seat. "Before I say anything," he said carefully, "I need you to stay calm. Fear changes the sound of the world. Everything becomes sharper. The rain, your breathing, the tiny creak of leather seats. I could suddenly hear all of it. You're frightening me," I whispered. "I know," he said softly. "I'm sorry." Then he asked something that made no sense at all. "Has anyone besides your son been inside your house recently?" I blinked. "No." "Anyone with keys?" "Only Caleb." His jaw tightened slightly. That was the first moment real fear entered me. Not panic, not shock. Fear. The kind that arrives quietly before your mind fully understands why. "Hassan," I said slowly, "what is this about?" He exhaled deeply before speaking. "For the last 2 weeks," he said, "I've seen your son's car parked near your house several nights after midnight." I frowned immediately. "That's impossible. Caleb lives almost an hour away." "He was there." My pulse quickened. "He probably stopped by." "At 1 in the morning?" The question hung heavily between us. I looked away. Outside, rainwater streamed along the cracked pavement beneath the streetlights. I suddenly remembered the hallway light left on, the shifted documents, the basement door slightly open last Thursday. Small things, tiny things. But together, they no longer felt small. "You're sure it was his car?" "Yes." "And tonight?" Hassan nodded slowly. I saw it again. A strange pressure formed in my chest. "He called me 20 minutes ago saying he was working late." I know. The way he said it unsettled me even more. "What do you mean you know?" Hassan hesitated, then carefully reached for his phone mounted near the dashboard. He tapped the screen twice and held it toward me. A photo, dark, rainy, blurry from distance, but unmistakable. A black BMW parked half a block from my house. Time stamped 32 minutes earlier. "That was tonight," he said quietly. I stared at the image. My mouth went dry. "Why would you take this?" His expression changed slightly. Not suspicious, concerned. Because something about it felt wrong. I looked up sharply. "What exactly are you saying?" For a moment, he said nothing. Then, "Your son wasn't sitting in the car." Cold spread through my arms. "He came out of your backyard gate." The words hit me so hard I physically recoiled. "No, I watched him." "That doesn't make sense." He looked around before getting into the car. "You're mistaken." "I'm not." My breathing became shallow. Caleb had keys. Of course he did. Richard gave him a set years ago for emergencies. But why would he sneak into the house at night instead of simply visiting me? Unless... No. No mother wants to think badly of her child. Your mind fights against it, creates excuses, protects them, protects you. "There has to be another explanation," I whispered. "I hope there is." Silence settled heavily between us. Then Hassan spoke again. "Have you checked your financial paperwork recently?" My stomach tightened immediately. "How do you know about that?" "You told me once your husband handled most of the finances." I nodded slowly. After Richard died, managing everything alone overwhelmed me. Insurance papers, property taxes, retirement accounts, legal documents. Richard organized everything carefully, but grief makes even simple paperwork feel impossible. Eventually, Caleb started helping. At first, it seemed natural. He worked in finance, he understood investments. He said he wanted to protect me. And honestly, after Richard died, it felt comforting having someone take control of things I no longer had energy to understand. Caleb began stopping by monthly to review accounts. Sometimes he brought forms for me to sign, transfer authorizations, tax adjustments, insurance renewals. I rarely questioned any of it. He was my son, and I trusted him completely. At least I had. Hassan studied my face carefully. When was the last time you reviewed those documents yourself? I don't know. That's not good. Something inside me started unraveling. Not because I believed Caleb had done something terrible, but because for the first time, I realized how vulnerable I actually was. Older people become dependent slowly. So slowly you barely notice it happening. One signature here, one favor there, one explanation you're too exhausted to question, until suddenly someone else controls parts of your life you no longer understand. My hands trembled slightly in my lap. Hassan, are you saying my son is stealing from me? I'm saying, he replied carefully, that men don't sneak into their mother's house after midnight unless there's something they don't want explained. The rain intensified outside. Thunder rolled faintly somewhere downtown. I thought about Caleb as a little boy sitting on Richard's shoulders during summer parades, the child who used to run into my arms after school, the teenager who cried when our family dog died, the young man who promised after Richard's funeral, "I'll take care of you now, Mom." Tears burned behind my eyes. I don't understand. Hassan's voice softened. Maybe there's nothing criminal happening, but your instincts already know something's wrong. That sentence broke something open inside me. Because he was right. For weeks, months maybe, something inside me had been whispering quietly. Small discomforts, small inconsistencies, moments that felt off. And every single time I ignored them, because the truth was too painful to imagine. Then Hassan said something that made my blood run cold. "There's another reason I didn't want you going inside tonight." I looked at him immediately. What reason? His eyes shifted toward the rain-covered windshield. "When I drove past your block earlier," he paused, "I saw your basement light on. My entire body froze. I never left the basement light on. Never." Richard used to obsess over electricity bills. 40 years later, I still turned lights off automatically. Every single room, every single time. Hassan. His expression remained calm, but serious. "And when your son came out of the backyard gate," he swallowed slightly, "he wasn't alone." The words landed like ice water inside my chest. For several seconds, I could not speak. Rain hammered harder against the windows, while distant headlights slid across the empty parking lot. My voice barely came out. "Who was with him?" Hassan shook his head slowly. I couldn't see clearly. Male, taller than your son, hooded jacket. Fear spread through me in slow waves. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet, heavy, like something sinking deeper and deeper inside my body. What were they doing? I don't know. His answer came carefully. But they were carrying boxes. My stomach turned immediately. What kind of boxes? File boxes. The world seemed to narrow around me. Richard's basement office, the filing cabinets, the document storage shelves. My husband had kept records of everything: taxes, insurance policies, property deeds, retirement accounts, investment statements. Even after his death, I rarely touched the basement. It still smelled faintly like him: paper, dust, coffee, motor oil from his old work jackets hanging near the stairs. I suddenly remembered something Caleb asked me 2 months earlier. Mom, where did Dad keep the original property documents? At the time, the question seemed harmless. Now it echoed differently inside my head. Hassan watched me carefully. Do you want me to drive you somewhere safe tonight? I stared blankly ahead. No, my voice cracked slightly. I need to know what's happening. You don't have to go in there alone. I closed my eyes briefly. Part of me still wanted an innocent explanation. Maybe Caleb was organizing paperwork. Maybe Vanessa needed old tax records. Maybe I was overreacting. But another part of me, a deeper, quieter part, already knew something was terribly wrong. I looked toward Hassan. Drive me home. His jaw tightened immediately. I don't think that's smart. I need to see for myself. For several moments, he said nothing. Then finally, he nodded once. Okay. The drive back felt longer than usual. Every red light stretched endlessly. Every passing car made my nerves tighten. Chicago looked different after midnight. Stores shuttered, streetlights flickering against wet pavement, people moving like shadows beneath umbrellas. And somewhere inside that sleeping city, my son had been inside my house without telling me. The closer we got to my neighborhood, the quieter Hassan became. When we turned onto my block, he slowed immediately. The black BMW was gone, but my porch light was still on, and beneath the rain, I could see it, the basement light glowing faintly through the small lower window beside the house. My breathing stopped. Hassan, I see it. The taxi rolled slowly past my home. Then Hassan parked half a block away beneath a dead streetlight. You stay here, he said firmly. No. Yes. I'm not sitting in this car while someone's inside my house. You don't know who's in there, and neither do you. His expression hardened slightly. Then he sighed. Fine, but you stay behind me. The rain soaked through my coat immediately as we stepped onto the sidewalk. Cold wind whipped through the street. My house looked strangely unfamiliar in the darkness. Not comforting, not safe, just silent, too silent. Hassan moved carefully up the walkway while I followed close behind. The front porch boards creaked softly beneath our feet, and both of us stopped. The front door was unlocked. I felt the blood drain from my face. I always locked the door, always. Hassan looked back at me sharply. You said you lock it every night? Yes. He gently pushed the door open. Darkness, stillness, the familiar smell of old wood and dust. Nothing appeared disturbed, but the basement light still glowed faintly from below. And then I heard it. A sound underneath us, metal scraping softly, followed by a low male voice. My knees nearly gave out. Someone was still downstairs. Hassan immediately motioned for silence. His entire posture changed, alert, focused, careful. Slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He typed something quickly, then whispered, I'm calling 911. Another sound came from the basement, this time clearer. File drawers opening, paper shifting, then footsteps, coming toward the stairs. My entire body locked with terror. Hassan quietly moved me backward toward the front door. But before we could retreat, the basement light suddenly switched off. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Then complete silence. The kind of silence that feels alive. My heart pounded so violently I thought they could hear it upstairs. A floorboard creaked below us. One step, then another. Someone was climbing the basement stairs. Hassan grabbed my wrist gently. Outside, he whispered. We backed toward the porch as quietly as possible. But just as we reached the doorway, a voice called out from the darkness inside the house. Mom? I froze instantly. Caleb, my son stepped into the hallway shadows holding a flashlight. For one impossible second, relief flooded me so strongly my knees weakened. Then I saw his face. He looked terrified. Not guilty, terrified. Mom, he whispered sharply, what are you doing here? Rain blew across the open doorway behind us. Hassan stepped slightly in front of me. Caleb's eyes immediately locked onto him, and something changed in my son's expression recognition, panic, then anger. What the hell is this? Caleb snapped. I should ask you the same thing, I whispered. His breathing looked uneven. His expensive coat was wet. Mud stained the knees of his pants. And behind him, deep inside the dark hallway leading toward the basement, another figure moved, tall, broad shoulders, hood pulled low. My stomach dropped. Who's in my house? I asked. Caleb turned quickly. No one. But the lie came too fast, too automatic. The hooded man stepped partially into view, and in that moment, I saw something in his hand a metal lockbox. Richard's lockbox, the one that contained every original financial document my husband ever kept property deeds, bank records, retirement information, insurance paperwork, everything. I stared at my son in disbelief. Caleb? His face collapsed slightly, like a child caught doing something unforgivable. Then the hooded man suddenly shouted, We need to go, now. Everything exploded at once after that. The man shoved past Caleb. Hassan immediately pulled me backward as the stranger sprinted through the rain toward the alley beside the house. Caleb shouted after him, Hurry! And that single word destroyed something inside me forever. Because in that moment, my son stopped looking like a frightened child and started looking like someone involved. The man vanished into the rain, fast, too fast. One second he was inside my house, the next he disappeared into the darkness beside the alley. Hassan, I gasped. But Hassan never chased him. Instead, he stayed directly in front of me, protecting me, shielding me, like he already understood something I still could not fully accept. This was not random. This involved my son. Caleb stood frozen in the doorway. Rainwater dripped from his coat sleeves onto the hardwood floor Richard installed himself 30 years earlier. My voice trembled. What is happening? He rubbed both hands across his face quickly. Mom, just calm down. That sentence broke something inside me immediately. Not because of the words, because of the tone. Dismissive, controlled, like I was the problem, like I had interrupted something. Police sirens echoed faintly somewhere in the distance, still far away, but getting closer. Caleb heard them too. Panic flashed across his face instantly. Mom, listen to me carefully, he whispered urgently. This is not what you think. Then tell me what it is. His eyes darted toward the basement, then toward the street, then back to me. And suddenly I saw it. Not fear for me, fear for himself. Hassan spoke calmly beside me. The police are already coming. Caleb immediately snapped toward him. You called the cops? Yes. My son cursed under his breath and stepped outside onto the porch. Rain soaked through his hair instantly. You have no idea what you've done. I stared at him in disbelief. No, Caleb, I think I finally do. The sirens grew louder, closer now. Caleb's breathing became shallow. Then finally, he looked at me directly, and for one brief moment, I saw the exhausted little boy he used to be. The child who cried when thunderstorms shook the windows. The boy who once ran into my room after nightmares. The son Richard adored more than anything in this world. Then the moment vanished. Mom, he whispered. I was trying to fix something. My stomach twisted painfully. What does that mean? He looked toward the basement again. I need you to trust me. Trust. The word felt almost cruel, because trust was exactly what shattered the second I saw that stranger carrying Richard's lockbox through my house. The police cars turned onto the street. Blue and red lights washed across the rain soaked houses. Neighbors' porch lights flickered on one by one. Curtains shifted. People watching, always watching. Two officers stepped out quickly, hands near their belts. One looked toward Hassan first. Who made the call? I did, Hassan answered calmly. The second officer focused on Caleb. And you are? My son, I said quietly. The officer looked between us immediately, sensing tension. What happened tonight, ma'am? I opened my mouth, then closed it again, because suddenly I didn't know what to say. My son illegally entered my house? My son helped a stranger steal financial documents? My son lied to me? Even thinking it felt impossible. Caleb stepped forward immediately. This is all a misunderstanding. Hassan's expression hardened slightly. The front door was unlocked. I have a key. There was another man inside. Caleb hesitated. Too long, the officers noticed. Who was the other individual? One asked sharply. A friend. What's his name? Silence. Rain pounded harder against the roof gutters. The officer's tone changed immediately. Sir, what is his name? Caleb swallowed. Marcus. Last name. Another pause. I suddenly realized something horrifying. My son had no intention of telling the truth. Not here, not now, maybe not ever. One officer moved toward the basement stairs inside the house, while the other stayed with us on the porch. Several long moments passed. Then the officer downstairs shouted, Clear! No intruder, no stolen lockbox, nothing. Whoever Marcus was, he escaped with everything. The officer returned upstairs holding a flashlight. Ma'am, do you know if anything's missing? My voice felt distant. There was a lockbox downstairs. What kind of lockbox? Metal, black, about this size. I held my hands apart weakly. What was inside? I hesitated, then answered honestly. Financial documents. That immediately changed everything. The officers exchanged a quick look. One turned toward Caleb. Sir, were you removing financial records from your mother's property tonight? No. The lie came instantly, cold, automatic. I stared at him in shock. Even Hassan looked stunned by how quickly the answer came. The officer continued carefully. Then why was another individual carrying the lockbox? Caleb's jaw tightened. He panicked when you arrived. Why? He thought Hassan was trying to rob us. The explanation sounded ridiculous even before he finished saying it. The officer's expression confirmed it. Your friend ran because he thought a taxi driver was robbing your mother's house? Caleb said nothing. The silence became unbearable. Finally, I whispered, Why were you in the basement? My son looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time all night, I saw shame, real shame. Not fear, not anger, shame. Mom, his voice cracked softly. I needed Dad's documents. Why? Another silence. Then, because I'm in trouble. The words hit harder than I expected. Suddenly, the anger inside me tangled with fear. What kind of trouble? He looked down at the porch floor. Financial. Every muscle in my body tightened. The officers exchanged another look but stayed quiet, letting him speak. Caleb rubbed both hands over his wet face. I invested in a restaurant project last year. I blinked slowly. You hate restaurants. I know. Then why would you invest in one? Because Vanessa's brother convinced me it would explode. Something inside me sank instantly. Vanessa, his wife, beautiful, charming, always chasing bigger homes, bigger vacations, bigger everything. How much money? He didn't answer. I repeated the question. How much? His eyes finally lifted toward mine. Almost everything. The world tilted slightly. Richard's retirement savings, the education fund, the investment accounts, the accounts Caleb helped manage after Richard died. Oh my God. It was supposed to double. My voice rose for the first time. You gambled with our money? It wasn't gambling. You lost it? I was trying to recover it before you found out. The sentence echoed in my head like broken glass. Before you found out. Not before he fixed it. Not before he made things right. Before I discovered it. The officer stepped in gently. Sir, whose idea was it to remove the lockbox tonight? Caleb's silence answered before he spoke. Then quietly. Marcus said there were documents inside that could expose everything. My knees weakened. Hassan immediately steadied my arm, and suddenly the entire night rearranged itself inside my mind. The lies, the distance, the late work excuses, the sudden financial stress, the tension in Caleb's voice for months, Richard's missing records, even Vanessa avoiding my calls lately. It was all connected. Every piece, every silence, every strange feeling I tried to ignore. The officer spoke again. Sir, we'll need you to come downtown and make a statement. Caleb looked horrified. Am I under arrest? Right now, we're investigating possible financial fraud and unlawful removal of legal documents. Fraud. The words shattered across the porch like thunder. My son looked at me desperately. Mom, please. I could barely breathe. And then, through all the shock, one terrifying realization finally surfaced. If Hassan had dropped me off 10 minutes earlier, I would have walked straight into that basement, straight into two desperate men trying to hide stolen money. And maybe desperate people do dangerous things when they're cornered. The police took Caleb downtown just after 2 a.m. Not in handcuffs, not like a criminal, but not like an innocent man either. He looked back at me once before getting into the patrol car. Rainwater dripped from his hair onto his coat collar. His eyes looked exhausted, small somehow, like the weight of everything had finally crushed through whatever confidence he had left. Mom, his voice barely carried through the rain. I was going to fix it. Then the car door shut, and he was gone. The flashing lights disappeared slowly down the wet Chicago street. Neighbors closed curtains. Porch lights clicked off one by one. The world returned to silence. But my life did not. I stood frozen on the porch, staring into the darkness long after the police left. Hassan stayed nearby quietly, not rushing me, not speaking, just present. Finally, he said softly, "You shouldn't stay here alone tonight." I looked toward the basement stairs inside the house. The light still glowed faintly below. For the first time in 40 years, my home no longer felt safe. Not because of strangers, because of what I now knew. Or maybe because of what I still didn't know. How much do you think he took? I whispered. Hassan hesitated carefully. I don't know, but something in his face told me he feared the answer. Inside the house, everything looked normal. That almost made it worse. The family photos still lined the hallway. Richard smiling beside Lake Michigan. Caleb at 12 holding his baseball trophy. Christmas mornings, graduations, vacations. An entire life hanging neatly on the walls, while underneath it, everything had quietly fallen apart. I walked slowly toward the basement stairs. Hassan followed close behind. The wooden steps creaked beneath our feet. At the bottom, Richard's office looked destroyed. File drawers hung open, folders scattered across the floor, cabinets unlocked, the small safe in the corner partially emptied. I felt physically sick. Richard was meticulous, organized, precise. He treated paperwork like sacred things, every account labeled, every record protected, and now strangers had torn through his office like scavengers. I crouched slowly beside an overturned box and picked up a photograph lying face down on the floor. Richard and Caleb, fishing trip, Wisconsin, 20 years ago, both smiling. My chest tightened painfully. How does a family become this? I whispered. Hassan remained silent because there was no answer, not a simple one. I slowly stood and looked around the basement again. Then something caught my attention. The old filing cabinet beside Richard's desk. Second drawer slightly open. I walked toward it carefully. Inside sat a single dark blue folder, untouched among the chaos. Strange. Everything else had been searched aggressively, but not this. I pulled it out slowly. Immediately, I recognized Richard's handwriting across the front. Private authorization file. My stomach tightened. I opened it carefully. Inside were account documents, property records, insurance information, and beneath them, a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. Evelyn. My hands started shaking instantly. Richard rarely wrote letters. He always preferred conversations. Slow, thoughtful conversations over coffee at night. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded, handwritten note. I recognized his handwriting immediately. Steady, careful, familiar. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then something has gone wrong. I told myself for years this letter was unnecessary. Perhaps I was being overly cautious. But life has taught me that love sometimes blinds us to things we should notice sooner, especially where family is concerned. My eyes blurred immediately. Hassan quietly stepped away, giving me privacy. I continued reading. I know you trust Caleb completely. So do I. But trust and pressure are dangerous together. Over the last 3 years, I noticed changes in him. Small at first. Expensive habits, financial risks, borrowing against future earnings. I confronted him twice, and each time he minimized it. I wanted to believe him. But I also protected you. My breathing became shallow. Protected me? I turned the page. The majority of our remaining assets were quietly transferred into secondary protections only you can legally authorize. Caleb knows about the visible accounts. He does not know about the protected ones. If circumstances ever force you to question his judgment, contact attorney Michael Levin immediately. He has instructions. My knees nearly gave out. Richard knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to prepare for this possibility. Tears slid down my face silently. Not just grief, not betrayal, something deeper. The terrible realization that my husband saw danger coming long before I did. At the bottom of the page, Richard had written one final sentence. And Evelyn, if this letter ever becomes necessary, please remember this. Loving someone does not mean protecting them from consequences. I covered my mouth, trying not to cry aloud, because suddenly I understood something horrifying. Richard had spent years quietly protecting both of us, protecting me from financial ruin, and protecting Caleb from completely destroying himself. I looked back inside the folder. Additional documents sat beneath the letter: private account numbers, trust structures, property protections, legal instructions. And then one line stopped me cold. Primary house ownership transferred to Evelyn Carter irrevocably. I stared at it in disbelief. The house, completely under my name, not Caleb's, not shared, mine. Richard had changed it years ago, without telling anyone, even me. Footsteps creaked softly behind us upstairs. Both Hassan and I froze instantly. Someone was inside the house again. Hassan immediately moved toward the basement stairs, quiet, alert. Then a voice called shakily from upstairs. Mom? Vanessa, Caleb's wife. She sounded terrified. I slowly climbed the stairs, holding Richard's folder tightly against my chest. Vanessa stood near the kitchen doorway, soaked from rain, mascara streaked beneath her eyes. For once, she looked nothing like the polished, elegant woman she carefully presented to the world. She looked frightened. "Where's Caleb?" she asked immediately. "The police took him downtown." Her face drained completely. Oh my God. Then something unexpected happened. She looked directly at the folder in my hands, and panic flashed across her face so quickly she couldn't hide it. Not sadness, not concern. Panic. My entire body went cold again, because in that moment, I realized Vanessa already knew exactly what was inside that folder. Vanessa stared at the folder like she had seen a ghost. The fear in her eyes lasted less than a second, but it was enough. I noticed. Hassan noticed too. The kitchen fell completely silent, except for rain tapping against the windows. Vanessa tried to recover quickly. "Is Caleb okay?" she asked, but her voice sounded forced now, careful, controlled. I held the folder tighter against my chest. "He's speaking with police." Her breathing became uneven. "Police? Evelyn, this is insane. Caleb would never hurt you." The sentence felt rehearsed, too fast, too polished. I suddenly realized something painful. Vanessa had probably spent years cleaning up Caleb's mistakes, protecting appearances, protecting image, protecting lifestyle. I looked at her quietly. "How long have you known?" Her expression froze. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Rain thundered harder outside. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then finally, she whispered, "We were trying to fix it." The exact same words Caleb used earlier, like they practiced them. My chest tightened painfully. "How much money is gone?" Vanessa looked down immediately. That answer alone terrified me. "Hassan," I whispered softly, "could you give us a minute?" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable leaving me alone, but eventually nodded once. "I'll stay on the porch." After the front door closed, silence swallowed the kitchen again. Vanessa stood near the counter, twisting her wedding ring nervously. For years, I blamed her for creating distance between Caleb and me. Maybe some of that was true, but now, looking at her standing there, frightened and exhausted, I saw something else. A woman drowning beside my son. "What happened?" I asked quietly. Tears filled her eyes immediately. "It started 2 years ago." Her voice cracked. "Caleb began investing more aggressively after Richard died." I closed my eyes briefly. Of course. After Richard's funeral, Caleb suddenly became obsessed with expanding wealth. New investment opportunities, business partnerships, private ventures. At the time, I thought he was simply ambitious. Now I understood. He was chasing losses. Vanessa continued shakily. "At first, he made money, a lot of money." That was true. I remembered the expensive vacations, the new BMW, the luxury condo downtown, designer furniture, private schools they suddenly discussed for future children. It all escalated quickly, too quickly. He kept saying he finally understood how rich people stay rich, Vanessa whispered bitterly. Then her face collapsed. But everything started falling apart last year. I sat slowly at the kitchen table. What happened? There was a restaurant investment. Caleb mentioned that already. But Vanessa shook her head immediately. It wasn't just a restaurant. Fear tightened inside me again. "What do you mean?" She looked toward the dark basement doorway, then lowered her voice. "Marcus introduced him to other people." The name made my stomach twist. Who is Marcus really? Vanessa swallowed hard. "He brokers private investments." "Legally?" Her silence answered me. I suddenly understood why the police reacted so quickly earlier. This was bigger than bad decisions, much bigger. Vanessa sat across from me, trembling. "At first, Caleb only borrowed against future returns. Then her voice broke completely. But eventually he started moving money temporarily between accounts. My blood ran cold. What accounts? Her eyes filled instantly. Yours. I physically recoiled. No. He always intended to replace it. The words shattered something inside me. Because every person who steals says the same thing eventually. I was going to put it back. I covered my mouth, trying to breathe steadily. How much? Vanessa whispered the number. And for several seconds, I genuinely could not process it. Nearly $400,000. Richard's retirement savings. 40 years of work gone. I stared at her in disbelief. That's impossible. He kept trying to recover losses before you noticed. How long? Almost 11 months. 11 months. For nearly a year, my son smiled at me across dinner tables while secretly draining the life Richard and I built together. I suddenly remembered every moment Caleb insisted on handling paperwork himself. Every time he told me not to stress over finances. Every time he rushed me through signatures. Trust becomes dangerous when mixed with grief. Richard knew that. That was why he left the letter. A sharp pain spread through my chest. Not physical, emotional. The unbearable pain of realizing someone you love has been quietly lying to your face for months. Then Vanessa whispered something even worse. Marcus wanted the rest. I looked up slowly. The protected accounts. My fingers tightened around Richard's folder instantly. He knew about them? No. Then how? Vanessa wiped tears from her cheeks. Caleb told him there had to be more money somewhere. The room spun slightly. He thought the lockbox contained access information. I suddenly understood tonight completely. Marcus wasn't helping Caleb recover money. He was hunting for more. And desperate men become dangerous when money disappears. I remembered the stranger sprinting through my house, the panic in his voice, the way Caleb shouted for him to hurry. They weren't organizing paperwork. They were searching desperately before time ran out. How much does Caleb owe Marcus? Vanessa stared at the table, then finally answered. More than 200,000. Fear hit me instantly. Not financial fear, real fear. Because men connected to illegal money do not simply walk away. And suddenly Hassan's warning earlier echoed inside my head. Don't go inside yet. A chill spread through my body. If I had arrived home unexpectedly while those men searched the basement, what would they have done? Would Marcus have panicked? Would Caleb have protected me? Or protected himself? The thought made me physically ill. Vanessa suddenly looked toward me desperately. Please don't let them destroy him. The sentence stunned me. Destroy him? My son destroyed himself. But mothers are dangerous because love survives even when trust dies. Part of me still wanted to protect him, even now, even after everything. I looked toward Richard's folder again, then slowly opened it on the kitchen table. Vanessa's eyes widened instantly. Inside sat every hidden protection Richard quietly built. Backup trusts, protected accounts, emergency transfers, legal structures. Richard had anticipated disaster years earlier, not because he stopped loving Caleb, because he understood him. At the bottom sat a business card. Michael Levin, estate and financial attorney. I stared at it for several long seconds, then finally picked up my phone. Vanessa's voice trembled immediately. What are you doing? I met her eyes calmly, for the first time since Richard died. My voice steadied slowly. I'm taking control of my own life. Then I dialed the number, and upstairs on the front porch, through the rain-soaked darkness, I saw Hassan watching the street carefully, like he already knew this nightmare was far from over. Michael Levin answered at 2:43 in the morning. His voice sounded old, alert, calm in the way only experienced lawyers sound during emergencies. Evelyn? The moment he recognized my voice, his tone changed immediately. What happened? That single question told me everything. Richard warned him this day might come. I looked toward Vanessa sitting silently at the kitchen table, then toward the rain soaked window where Hassan still watched the street outside. And finally, I answered. Richard was right. Silence filled the line briefly. Then Michael spoke carefully. Are you safe right now? Yes. Is Caleb involved? The question nearly broke me. Yes. Another pause. Not surprised, not shocked, just disappointed. I'll come immediately, he said quietly, no matter the hour. After hanging up, I sat motionless for several seconds. The kitchen clock ticked softly above the stove. 2:47 a.m. Only a few hours earlier, I thought my biggest worry was my son working too much. Now I was sitting in my kitchen, discovering my child stole from me. Life changes quietly until suddenly it changes all at once. Vanessa finally whispered, Caleb never wanted to hurt you. I looked at her slowly. That stopped mattering the second he started lying. Her eyes filled with tears again. He thought he could recover everything before you noticed. That's what addicts always believe. The word slipped out before I fully realized it. Addict. Not drugs, not alcohol. Something worse in some ways. Money, risk, status. The hunger to maintain a lifestyle long after reality collapses underneath it. I remembered Richard warning Caleb years ago. Wealth built too fast disappears even faster. At the time, Caleb laughed it off. Now Richard was gone, and the warning remained. Headlights swept briefly across the front windows outside. Hassan immediately straightened on the porch, then relaxed slightly. An older, dark sedan pulled slowly to the curb. Michael Levin stepped out carrying a leather briefcase beneath an umbrella. Even from the kitchen window, he looked exactly the same. Gray hair, sharp posture, careful movements. Richard trusted very few people completely. Michael was one of them. Moments later, he entered the kitchen, removing his wet coat carefully. His eyes moved instantly across the room. Me, Vanessa, the open folder. And finally, understanding settled across his face. So, he said quietly, it finally happened. I felt tears rising again. How long did Richard suspect something? Michael sat slowly across from me. Long enough. The answer hurt more than I expected. Vanessa looked stunned. You knew? Michael nodded once. Richard began restructuring assets 4 years ago. 4 years. My husband protected me for 4 years without ever making me feel afraid of our son. That realization shattered me completely. Michael opened his briefcase and removed several documents. Richard loved Caleb deeply, he said softly, but he understood two things very clearly. What? That grief weakens judgment. He looked directly at me, and that money reveals character faster than almost anything else. The kitchen fell silent again. Finally, I whispered, How bad is this? Michael's expression hardened slightly. That depends how involved Caleb became with this Marcus individual. Vanessa looked down immediately. Bad sign. Very bad sign. Michael noticed too. Vanessa, he said carefully, has Marcus ever threatened Caleb? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. My chest tightened instantly. When? A few weeks ago. What did he say? Vanessa wiped tears from her cheeks. He told Caleb debt makes people desperate. The room suddenly felt colder. Michael leaned back slowly. That means this moved beyond financial mistakes. Fear spread through me again, not just for myself, for Caleb, because no matter what he had done, he was still my son. Michael opened another folder carefully. Evelyn, listen to me very closely. His tone changed completely now. Professional, precise. The hidden accounts Richard created are safe. Marcus cannot access them without multiple authorizations. Relief washed through me briefly, then disappeared immediately. What about the missing money? Michael sighed quietly. Some may be recoverable. Some, not all. I closed my eyes. 40 years of savings. Richard working overtime, knee clipping coupons, canceled vacations, sacrifices, gone because my son could not stop chasing the illusion of becoming richer. Then suddenly Hassan opened the front door sharply. Every head turned instantly. His face looked tense again. There's a car parked across the street. Fear hit me immediately. What kind of car? Black SUV. Vanessa's face drained instantly. Oh, God. Michael stood immediately. You know the vehicle? She nodded weakly. It belongs to Marcus. The entire house went silent. Rain hammered the windows. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Hassan said quietly, He's been sitting there for 3 minutes. Pure terror flooded my body. Michael immediately reached for his phone. Call the police, Vanessa whispered suddenly. But Hassan was still staring through the front curtains carefully. No, he said quietly. Something's wrong. My pulse thundered inside my ears. What do you mean? He's not watching the house. Every nerve inside me tightened. Then what's he doing? Hassan looked directly at me, waiting. And at that exact moment, my phone rang, unknown number. The sound nearly made me jump. Everyone stared at the screen. Over and over, the phone vibrated across the kitchen table. Unknown caller, unknown caller, unknown caller. Finally, I answered with shaking hands. Hello? For several seconds, nothing. Only breathing. Then a man's voice spoke softly, calm, controlled, dangerously calm. You should have let your son fix this quietly. Every ounce of blood drained from my body. Marcus. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. The voice continued. Now police are involved. I gripped the edge of the table hard enough my knuckles hurt. What do you want? A soft laugh came through the phone. Right now? His voice lowered. I want what belongs to me. My heart pounded violently. There's no money left. Wrong answer. I suddenly understood something horrifying. Marcus didn't believe the money was gone. He believed I was hiding it. Richard's protected accounts, the hidden assets, the lockbox. Marcus thought everything Caleb lost still existed somewhere inside this house. And desperate men do terrifying things when they believe someone is withholding money from them. Marcus spoke again softly. Tell Hassan to stop watching the window. Every person in the kitchen froze instantly, because that meant one thing. Marcus wasn't alone outside. He had people watching the house. And somehow he already knew the taxi driver's name. The kitchen went completely still. Marcus knew Hassan's name. That meant this was no longer about money alone. This was surveillance, planning, control. I gripped the phone tighter, trying to steady my breathing. What do you want from me? I whispered. Marcus laughed softly again. Not loudly, not crazily. That almost made it worse. Men who stay calm while threatening people are the dangerous ones. I already told you, he said. The money. There is no money. You should ask your son how much he promised me. Tears burned behind my eyes instantly. because suddenly I understood the full truth. Caleb didn't just lose money, he borrowed against money that never belonged to him, against me, against Richard's life, against our home. Marcus continued calmly. Your son told me your husband hid accounts. My stomach tightened painfully. He lied. No, Marcus replied quietly. He guessed. A long silence followed. Then, but I think he guessed correctly. I looked toward Richard's folder sitting on the kitchen table. Every instinct inside me screamed to hide it, destroy it, protect it. Marcus spoke again. I'm giving you one chance to handle this peacefully. Fear spread cold through my chest. What does that mean? It means no police statements. No police. My pulse jumped immediately. Marcus was afraid now. Good. But afraid people are unpredictable. You already involved them, he continued. That complicated things. Headlights shifted faintly outside the front windows. Hassan moved away from the curtains carefully, watching, calculating. Michael quietly whispered, They're stalling. I nodded faintly. Marcus lowered his voice. At 8 a.m., Caleb signs authorization papers transferring the remaining assets. No, the answer came instantly, firmly, surprisingly firm. Maybe because something inside me finally snapped. 40 years of sacrifice. Richard working until his hands hurt. Me budgeting groceries down to the dollar. And now strangers were threatening me inside my own kitchen because my son gambled our lives away. No, I repeated. Silence filled the line. Then Marcus said softly, You should think carefully before saying that again. And suddenly, through the phone, I heard something in the background, a car door, followed by footsteps, approaching gravel, approaching my house. Hassan heard it too. His eyes snapped toward the side window immediately. They're moving. Michael grabbed his phone instantly. This time he dialed 911 himself. Vanessa began crying quietly. I told Caleb this would happen, but nobody answered her because outside the nightmare was getting closer. Marcus spoke one final sentence before disconnecting. Your son made promises. Now someone pays for them. The line went dead. At the exact same moment, motion lights exploded across the backyard. Everyone jumped. Shadows moved outside the rear windows. Two men, dark clothing, fast. My entire body froze. They're behind the house, Hassan said sharply. Michael immediately locked the back door. The kitchen suddenly felt terrifyingly fragile. Just wood, glass, thin walls between us and desperate men. Then came the first bang, heavy, violent, the side gate crashing open. Vanessa screamed. I physically couldn't move. Fear rooted me in place. Not movie fear, real fear. The kind that makes your body stop obeying you. Hassan stepped directly in front of me instantly, protecting me again. Always protecting me. Then another sound. Metal hitting the back door. Once, twice, trying to force it open. Police sirens echoed faintly somewhere in the distance. Still too far. Way too far. Upstairs, Hassan ordered. Nobody moved. Now. This time we listened. Michael grabbed Richard's folder while Hassan pulled me toward the staircase. Vanessa stumbled behind us, crying. Another violent crash hit the back door below. Wood splintered. I heard male voices shouting, then footsteps inside the kitchen. Oh God, they got in. My knees nearly collapsed climbing the stairs. The hallway upstairs looked dark and endless. Childhood photographs lined the walls beside us. Caleb at 7, Caleb at 16, Caleb leaving for college. My son smiling from every frame while downstairs, his choices brought criminals into my home. Hassan shoved us toward the master bedroom. Lock it. Michael slammed the door shut while Hassan pushed a dresser against it. The room shook faintly downstairs, cabinets opening, furniture crashing, searching. They were searching for the hidden money. Vanessa covered her mouth, sobbing uncontrollably. This is my fault. No, I whispered automatically. But deep down, Part of me blamed all of us. The silence after Richard died created this. We stopped talking honestly, stopped seeing clearly, stopped questioning things we should have questioned. A loud crash echoed downstairs, then footsteps on the staircase. Coming up, every breath inside the bedroom stopped. Slow, heavy footsteps creaked upward one by one. Then voices, male, low, close. The footsteps stopped directly outside the bedroom door. Silence. My heart pounded so violently I thought they could hear it through the walls. Then the doorknob moved slowly, testing. Once, twice. The dresser rattled slightly against the pressure. Vanessa began shaking uncontrollably. Michael whispered, "Police are 2 minutes out." 2 minutes. It sounded impossible. Outside the bedroom door, a man spoke quietly. "Mrs. Carter." "Marcus." His voice sounded calm even now. "That folder belongs to me." I stared at the bedroom door, unable to breathe. Marcus continued softly. "Your husband made things complicated before he died." Rage suddenly cut through my fear. Not fear, rage. Richard protected us, and these men invaded his home, destroyed his office, threatened his family. Something inside me hardened instantly. "No," I said loudly through the door. Silence followed. Then Marcus laughed softly. "You're braver than your son." The sentence shattered me in a completely different way, because for the first time all night, I realized Marcus did not respect Caleb. He used him, manipulated him, saw weakness and exploited it, just like predators always do. Marcus spoke again. "Open the door peacefully and nobody gets hurt." Then something unexpected happened. Hassan stepped forward toward the door, calm, focused, dangerously calm. And in a low, steady voice, he said, "If you touch that door before police arrive." Silence stretched heavily. Then Hassan finished quietly, "I promise this house becomes the last bad decision you ever make." Everything went still outside. Even Marcus stopped speaking. And for the first time all night, I realized my taxi driver wasn't afraid of them anymore. For several long seconds, nobody moved outside the bedroom door. Then suddenly, sirens exploded across the street. Loud, close, multiple vehicles. Blue and red lights flashed through the bedroom curtains. And downstairs, everything changed instantly. Footsteps, shouting, running. One of the men cursed loudly. Another crash echoed through the house. Then Marcus shouted, "Move!" The footsteps thundered back down the staircase, fast, desperate, trying to escape. Police voices roared outside almost immediately. "Chicago PD! Don't move! Hands where we can see them!" Then chaos. More shouting. A crash from the kitchen. Someone screaming outside. Vanessa collapsed onto the edge of the bed, crying uncontrollably. Michael slowly stepped away from the dresser, blocking the door. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. Then finally, silence. The terrifying kind after violence ends. A hard knock hit the bedroom door. "Police," Hassan answered first. "We're inside." Moments later, officers entered carefully with flashlights and weapons drawn. The bedroom flooded with harsh white light. One officer immediately approached me. "Ma'am, are you injured?" I shook my head weakly. But honestly, I wasn't sure, because something inside me had been permanently damaged tonight. The officers escorted us downstairs carefully. The kitchen looked destroyed. Broken drawers, shattered glass, mud across the hardwood floors. Richard's framed photograph knocked sideways beside the hallway. Outside, Marcus sat handcuffed against a police car. Rain soaked through his dark jacket while officers searched the SUV. Another man stood nearby in cuffs, too. But what caught my attention most was Caleb. My son stood beside detectives near the curb, looking completely shattered. Not angry, not defensive, broken. When he saw me step outside wrapped in a blanket, his face collapsed instantly. Mom. His voice cracked painfully. I looked at him for a very long time, and suddenly I saw everything clearly. Not just the lies, not just the theft, the fear, the pressure, the desperation, the weakness he kept hiding behind expensive suits and confident smiles. People do terrible things slowly, one compromise, one lie, one shortcut, until eventually they become someone they barely recognize themselves. A detective approached me quietly. Mrs. Carter, we recovered most of the documents. I closed my eyes briefly in relief. Marcus was carrying the lockbox when officers stopped him behind the property. Richard's folder remained safe in Michael's hands, too. For the first time all night, I finally felt something loosen inside my chest. Not peace, but survival. The detective continued carefully. Your son has agreed to cooperate fully. I looked toward Caleb again. Rain dripped from his hair while he stared at the pavement like a child waiting for punishment. And suddenly I remembered him at age 9, after breaking Richard's watch. He cried harder confessing than he did getting punished. Because guilt hurts people differently when they still have conscience left. Will he go to jail? I whispered. The detective hesitated. That depends how much he helps us now. Marcus suddenly looked up from the police car. His eyes locked onto mine coldly, empty, dangerous. Then he smiled slightly. That smile terrified me more than the break in itself. Because Marcus wasn't emotional. He wasn't ashamed. Men like that move through life feeding on weakness in other people. And my son had become exactly the kind of weakness he looked for. The detective noticed my expression immediately. He won't get near you again. I nodded faintly. But fear lingers long after danger leaves, especially inside places once called home. Hours later, just before sunrise, the police finally left. The rain stopped. Chicago looked washed clean beneath pale morning light, but my house didn't. It looked wounded, tired, exhausted, like me. Vanessa left shortly before dawn to meet Caleb downtown with his attorney. Before leaving, she hugged me unexpectedly, tightly, crying. I'm sorry, she whispered over and over. And for the first time, I believed she truly meant it. Not because they got caught, because reality finally destroyed the illusion they were living inside. Michael stayed long enough to secure the documents properly. Then, before leaving, he placed one hand gently over Richard's folder. He loved you very much. Tears filled my eyes instantly. I know. He trusted you more than you realize. After he left, the house finally became quiet again. Only Hassan remained. He stood near the kitchen sink, staring out toward the backyard where police lights had flashed only an hour earlier. You should get some sleep, he said softly. But I shook my head. I don't think I can. Morning sunlight slowly crept across the damaged floorboards. The kitchen smelled faintly of rainwater and broken wood. And suddenly exhaustion hit me all at once. Not physical exhaustion, life exhaustion. The kind grief leaves behind. The kind of betrayal deepens. I sat slowly at the table and stared at Richard's old coffee mug still drying beside the sink. For years after his death, I thought losing him was the hardest thing I would ever survive. I was wrong. Watching your child lose himself, that is a different kind of grief entirely. Hassan quietly poured fresh coffee into 2 mugs, then sat across from me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then finally, I asked softly, why did you help me? He looked surprised by the question. You would have done the same. No, I whispered honestly. I don't think I would have noticed any of this. A faint, sad smile crossed his face. Most people don't. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds slowly. The storm was finally ending. Hassan looked toward the window thoughtfully. My mother used to say people reveal themselves most clearly when they're desperate. I nodded slowly. Tonight, desperation revealed everyone. Marcus revealed cruelty. Vanessa revealed fear. Caleb revealed weakness. And Richard, even after death, revealed love. Quiet, protective love. The kind that prepares for storms before they arrive. I looked at Hassan carefully. And what did tonight reveal about you? He looked down briefly before answering. That I was late once before. His voice sounded distant suddenly, a long time ago. I waited quietly. My younger sister trusted someone she shouldn't have, he said softly. She asked me for help, and I thought she was exaggerating. Pain moved across his face quickly, barely visible. But she wasn't. My chest tightened. What happened? He stared into his coffee for several seconds. By the time I realized she was truly afraid, his voice lowered. It was too late. Silence settled heavily between us, and suddenly I understood why Hassan noticed everything. Why he watched the street, why he remembered details, why he refused to let me walk into danger alone. This wasn't instinct, it was regret. The kind people carry forever. You saved my life tonight, I whispered. He shook his head immediately. No, but I interrupted softly. Yes, you did. Tears filled my eyes again, because the truth was painfully simple. If Hassan had dropped me off normally, I would have walked into that house alone, into desperate men, into fear, into something I might not have survived. The realization still chills me even now. Months have passed since that night. Caleb eventually accepted a plea agreement and cooperated fully against Marcus and the financial network surrounding him. Most of the stolen money was recovered. Not all, but enough. Enough to survive. Enough to rebuild. Vanessa left Chicago for a while after everything collapsed. Last I heard, she and Caleb are trying slowly to repair what remains of their marriage. As for me, I changed too. The locks on the house were replaced, security cameras installed, the basement restored. But the biggest change was inside me. For too long after Richard died, I handed pieces of my life away because grief made me tired. Tired people stop asking questions, stop noticing warning signs, stop protecting themselves. I will never live that way again. Sometimes people ask if I hate my son for what happened. I don't. Love doesn't disappear that easily. But trust? Trust is different. Trust rebuilds slowly, honestly, painfully, one truth at a time. Caleb visits every Sunday now. Not because he has to, because he wants to. We sit at the same kitchen table together, drinking coffee beneath the morning light. Some conversations are uncomfortable. Some are quiet. Healing rarely looks dramatic. Mostly, it looks consistent. As for Hassan, he still drives nights, and every Friday evening without fail, I leave a fresh cup of hot tea waiting when his taxi pulls to the curb outside my house. Not because I owe him, because sometimes survival begins with someone simply paying attention. And because one quiet sentence from a taxi driver changed the rest of my life forever. Don't go inside yet. Have you ever ignored a warning sign because it came from someone you trusted? And if you were in Evelyn's position, would you forgive your son after everything he did? Share your thoughts below and tell me where you're watching from tonight. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life inspired stories about family, betrayal, survival, and second chances. Because sometimes one quiet moment can change an entire life.